The ship that reappeared with no crew. It was a clear day, but the sea was heavy with something else. In 1947, a storm did not precede the arrival of the ghost ship. It simply drifted into view, an enigma on the horizon, a black shadow floating silently in the distance. The SS Ourang Medan had no crew, no captain, no passengers. Just an empty ship that had been found in the vastness of the Pacific, drifting aimlessly in the silent waters. But as the naval crew approached, a question gnawed at the air. Where was everyone? The first engineer to board the Ourang Medan had no idea he was stepping into a legend, one that would be whispered about in naval circles for decades. He had been part of the rescue team sent to investigate the vessel after a distress call crackled through the radio. Barely coherent, but the few words that made it through were enough to send shivers down anyone's spine. All officers. Dead. Lying in ... the cold. In the ... cabins. 9 a.m. the Ourang Medan had been abandoned for days when the ship was found drifting. At first it seemed like a simple case of negligence, a ship stranded by misfortune. But the closer they got, the clearer the horror became. As they climbed aboard, the stench of death hit them. But it wasn't just the smell that disturbed them. It was the sight. The crew wasn't missing. They were dead. But it wasn't the kind of death you could explain easily. It was ... unnatural. The bodies of the crew were scattered throughout the ship. But they weren't slumped over or lying in typical positions. No. The men were frozen in place, their eyes wide open, their faces contorted in terror. Hands stretched out, frozen mid-motion, as though they were reaching for something unseen. Some were still clutching their radios. Some were lying with their arms crossed over their chest, as though preparing for an attack. But there was nothing to fight, nothing that could explain what had happened. The last engineer to board the ship was a man whose name has remained a footnote in history. He was a young, idealistic officer, eager to prove his worth to the Navy. But what he saw on that ship would change him forever. At first, the men thought they could ignore it. They thought they could push the terror to the back of their minds and complete their mission. But the cold seeped into them. Not from the air, but from the ship itself. A chill, unlike anything they had ever felt before. As the engineer moved deeper into the ship's belly, it felt like the walls were closing in. He could hear the creaking of the vessel, the unsettling sounds of something shifting beneath the surface. 2 p.m. they made their way down into the cargo hold. The bodies were there too, strewn across the floor in strange, unnatural positions, their limbs stiff, their faces frozen in an eternal scream. And it wasn't just the crew. In the captain's quarters, a radio operator was found dead, with a microphone still gripped in his hand. His eyes were wide and staring. His mouth was slightly open, as if he had seen something too horrible to describe. But it wasn't just the bodies that haunted the engineers. There was an unmistakable presence aboard the ship. Something in the air that couldn't be seen, only felt. A heaviness, dark pressure that pushed against their chests and made it hard to breathe. The distress signal was a puzzle. The first words had been clear enough, but the rest were fragmented and incoherent. It was as though someone had been cut off mid-sentence just as they were about to reveal the truth. Fire. The radio had cracked out in bursts. Danger, ... cargo, ... chemical. Then there was a long silence. Silence that echoed louder than any words. The ship, abandoned for days, was the perfect picture of death. But its mystery was only beginning. How had the entire crew perished so violently, so suddenly? What had happened in the final moments aboard the Ourang Medan? There was no sign of struggle, no weapon, no explosion. Yet every single man aboard had met the same fate, a fate that was never explained. The chilling discovery was followed by another twist. The ship, found in perfectly good condition with no immediate signs of damage or distress, seemed to defy reason. What could have caused the crew's deaths? A gas leak? A fire? An explosion? But the ship was undamaged, and there were no chemical traces to explain it. At 10 o'clock p.m. When the engineers left the ship, they were rattled, their minds clouded with questions that no one could answer. But then, as the night wore on, something even stranger occurred. The Ourang Medan, now being towed back to port for further investigation, began to sink. Slowly, quietly, as if the ship itself had chosen to vanish into the depths. By the time rescue ships arrived, the Ourang Medan was gone. It had sunk without a trace, taking with it any hope of uncovering the mystery behind its crew's strange and violent deaths. But the legend didn't die. It spread. Whispers of the ghost ship reached every corner of the globe, and in the years that followed, it became an unsolved enigma that haunted the Navy. The last engineer to step foot on that ship would be haunted by it for the rest of his life. Every time he closed his eyes, he would see the faces of the men frozen in place, reaching for something they could never understand. No one truly knew what happened on the Ourang Medan, but some believed it was the work of something beyond human comprehension. A curse, a chemical reaction, a weapon too dangerous to be known, or maybe, just maybe, the ship had been a ghost itself, driven by some ancient force, a relic of a past too dark to understand. To this day, the SS Ourang Medan remains one of the most terrifying unsolved mysteries of the sea. Its crew, its fate, its purpose, locked forever in the void of the ocean. No answers. No closure. Just the silence of the waves and the legend of the ship that disappeared without a trace.